first. All right. Well, hello, everyone, and welcome to the 5 biggest mistakes speakers make from stage webinar. I'm so happy that you're here to join us. I'm your co-host, Chris Natsky. I'm here with JB Braden, my brother from another mother, and we're going to share a little bit more about ourselves here in a moment. But just want to say thanks so much for taking the time to join us here today. Both JB and I have been speakers for several years and have not only been able to share the stage together on a number of occasions, but also do work on our own. And one of the things that we love to do is not only be on stage, I think we're both hams at heart, but we also love to help others who are looking to get on stage, either to be an aspiring speaker and be able to take a message out in the world, or be able to promote their businesses, be able to support their businesses through speaking, either to sell a product, service, or something of that nature. So that's really what we want to be able to help you with today through the 5 biggest mistakes that we've identified that speakers make. And the way that today is going to work, what the purpose of today is we're going to help identify what we believe are the 5 biggest mistakes that speakers make. And why are we experts in doing that? Because we've made all of them. All right. So as we were preparing for this and we were starting to think about the things that we wanted to share, we're like, oh my gosh, I've done that. Or we both said that, right? So we're going to be sharing with you what we identify as the 5 biggest mistakes that speakers make. Number 2, what we're going to do is we're going to share some strategies and tools to help you either avoid those mistakes or overcome them when they occur. And then finally, we're going to give you some next steps for how to become a world-class presenter who educates, entertains, and converts your potential clients into other speaking engagements or to be able to purchase your services or your products. So that's what the gist of today is. And so as we move on now, what I want to do is I'm going to let my brother from another mother, JB Braden, introduce himself.
Well, thank you, Chris. I appreciate it. As Chris said, we have known each other for several years. We've shared several stages together, and it's an honor to be able to share this virtual stage and to be able to bless all of you with some of our knowledge and more importantly, some of the mistakes that we've made and what we've learned from them. Chris and I share the same passion around speaking, but also helping others to learn how to speak and do it in the right way. And so my name of my company is Beyond the Field Coaching. I've been speaking for 20 years now. And I can remember when I first got started, I was actually sitting on the couch looking for a job. How many of you remember something called monster.com? If you're old enough, you can remember that, right? And so I'm on there and I'm looking and I typed, for some reason, I have no idea to this day, Chris, why I did this, but I typed in public speaking. Okay, not a whole lot came up, but I remember this one ad came up and it was said, hey, we speak in schools. We're looking for people to travel around and speak in schools. At that particular time, I was doing a lot of coaching youth sports and working in the youth group at church. And I was like, okay, I like working with students. Let me do that. So I had to send in a resume and a video of me speaking. I have no idea what I spoke about, so don't ask. Okay. As a matter of fact, I'm a little fearful that that video is still floating out there somewhere. I hope not. I hope they trashed it. But so a couple of months go by and I don't get a call. I'm like, okay, I guess that video was pretty bad. About 3 months went by. I finally get an email. Hey, we want to invite you to our speaker training. So I show up. I fly out to Cincinnati to their speaker training. I walk in the room. There's about 200 other people just like me. Man, I felt like I walked in heaven because these are people like very outgoing, business minded. I was in heaven. Well, long story short, through that organization, which I worked for about 6 years, I got some of the best speaker training that I could have gotten. Still work with some of my coaches from that organization today. The name of that organization was monster.com. Travel around the country. Since then, I've been able to travel around the country, speak to over 1.5 million people, and I've been coaching speakers for almost 10 years now. So that's just a little bit about me, and I'm gonna shut up about me. You'll hear a little bit more about me throughout the process, but I want to throw it back over to my good buddy, brother from another mother, Chris. And by the way, a lot of people that know us, when we share the stage, they refer to us as ebony and ivory. So
There
I'm
you
gonna go
go.
ahead and throw it back
There
to
you go.
Ivory.
All right, right on, right on. So thanks everyone. My name is Chris Natsky, and my business is called Black Belt Leadership Speaking and Coaching. I'm an 8th degree black belt, former national Taekwondo champion. And you might be saying, well, what does a karate guy know about speaking? Well, interestingly enough, when you are teaching martial arts from very young age, is when I started martial arts. I was helping teach classes from the time I was 13 on. So being in front of a room was always really comfortable for me. And when I finally left college, after I graduated, my first job was in sales. So I spent a lot of time, not only in front of customers, but in front of large rooms where I was doing sales training. So then when I left the corporate environment back in 1995, and I was going to open up my own professional martial arts studio, I thought, man, how am I going to differentiate myself between the competition, which at that time I had about 6 competitive martial arts schools in a 2-mile radius of me. And I thought, I can do ads in newspapers and whatnot, but the way I can differentiate is if I go out and I speak. So I went to any grade school, middle school, high school that they'd let me into. And trust me, if you can keep first graders entertained, you can keep anyone's attention. But I did that to grow my school. And basically what happened is over the course of several years, maybe 3 to 5 years, that school grew from its infancy stage to over 500 students at one location that made it one of the largest schools in the country. And what was so interesting about that is as I was doing that, people started coming to me and going, wow, you're pretty good at this. Would you come to speak at this event? Would you come to speak at that event? And they weren't even about me promoting my martial arts school. I started to develop a talk just to entertain, educate people about martial arts and leadership. And pretty soon it just turned into a professional speaking career 10 years later. So now what I get to do through my company is not only speak, but I also get to coach to help people gain clarity on their purpose, increase their confidence, and take action to make their dreams come true. So really for me, I love speaking. I love being on stage. And it's a great way for me not only to communicate my message, but also be able to build my other aspects of my business. So that's one of the reasons that we came together for people that are looking to do the same thing today. So that's a little bit about both of us. So you might be asking, well, let's get to it, right? What are these 5 biggest mistakes that speakers make from stage? And as I said before, JB and I came together and said, hey, what are the things where we've really made some mistakes ourselves, or we've seen other speakers make mistakes on stage, kind of those cringe-worthy moments. And these are the ones we want to share with you. So JB is going to take us through and lead us on the first one, which is that speakers, they don't communicate their purpose of their presentation while they're on stage. So JB, why don't you take it away for us, brother?
Thank you, Chris. I appreciate that. And here's the thing: whether you're thinking about speaking, spoken for a little bit, or you've been speaking for years, just understand the things that we're going to share with you today can really help you move to the next level or another level. So I want to share that with you. And so when we talk about not communicating the purpose that you of your presentation, that actually starts before you hit the stage. Okay, and you can prevent this mistake before you get on stage by doing a few simple things. And one of the things that we teach in our workshop is we make sure that you're clear on your purpose of your presentation. Here's what we mean by that. Ask yourself the question, what's my purpose for this presentation? Okay. For some people, it may be just to educate the audience. Okay. Maybe it's just, I want to get out and I want to inspire people. I've worked with clients who say, you know what? I have a story. I think it's inspirational. I just want to get out and share it with the world. So what's your purpose of your presentation? Getting clear on that, because if you're not clear on that from the beginning, then you're not going to communicate that within your presentation. Okay. So getting clear on that. Okay. It's because, so if it's to inspire, is it to educate? Is it to entertain? Okay. Or is it to do all of them? For me, it's to inspire, educate, entertain, but also to convert. Now, here's what happened. I learned this mistake as I went along, because when I started my coaching business, I'd been speaking for years. So I knew that I wanted to use speaking as a marketing tool to grow my coaching business. Well, I'd get out there and I'd start speaking to people, and people like, man, you're great. You're doing a great job. And I was inspiring the hell out of people, but I wasn't converting very well, right? So I went back to one of my speaker coaches, and he just kind of helped me tweak my presentation, and he gave me some of those tools and tips that I now share with my clients when it comes to speaker coaching about how to structure the presentation to where it also converts. And so I learned that, and now I teach that, because how you structure the presentation and prepare it beforehand can help you communicate it as well. But there's so understanding what you want to do with the purpose of your presentation. We also like to ask the question, what do I want my audience to walk away with when I'm done? But here's the other thing. We also dial in on what's the problem that you're solving, okay? Because in your presentation, you want to be able to communicate the problem that you're solving in the presentation. But if you don't understand it, then you can't communicate that. And so preparing that and knowing that beforehand can keep you from making that mistake that a lot of people make. They get up, they start talking, and people halfway through the presentation, they're wondering, now, what is this person talking about? That's the last thing you want when you're in front of an audience. You want them to stay engaged. You want them to follow you as you go along. And the other mistake people make when it comes to communication is their call to action. The call to action. Okay, you want to make sure that you have a clear call to action and that you're communicating that. But most importantly, you want to make sure that the offer you have at the end of your presentation is congruent with your presentation. Okay, for instance, you don't want to get up there and start talking about how to bake a cake, but at the end of the presentation, you trying to sell them real estate. Does that make sense? I mean, that's kind of the extreme, but you want your offer to be congruent with your presentation. And so that's one of the biggest mistakes I've seen a lot of people make, is they're not communicating the purpose. Then at the end, the call to action doesn't match.
That's right.
Then there's one other one that I want Chris to speak to when it comes to having the right presentation.
Yeah, absolutely, JB. Thanks, buddy. I'll tell you what I find is that the confusion happens basically in three ways. What ends up happening is people will either have the right presentation for the wrong audience, the wrong presentation for the right audience, or the wrong presentation for the wrong audience. So we need to, as speakers, particularly if we have services that we want to have people invest in afterwards, or to hire us to share our message, to make sure that we're congruent, our message, to the audience that we want to be able to influence and inspire. Many times what happens is speakers have a pat presentation that they've developed, but they are not able to adjust it according to the audience that they're speaking to, as well as the end result that they want. In fact, it's one of those things like if you were in a dead sleep and we shook you up in the middle of the night and said, what's the reason for your presentation? You should be able to make it just flow right out of you. But many times when we're unclear, audiences are unclear too. And that all deals then with the call to action, because if you don't know what the purpose of it is, you're not able to guide people masterfully to the next steps afterwards. So that's the number one mistake that we've made here, is that speakers don't know how to communicate the purpose of their presentation. So now you're asking, what's number two? Well, number two is near and dear to my heart, and that says speakers try to be somebody that they're not. They try to be somebody that they're not. And, regardless of whether we're a seasoned speaker or we're just starting out, many times what we can do is we can try to emulate other speakers that have inspired us, and we end up not being ourselves. And authenticity as a speaker is probably our number one tool in our toolbox. I mean, you have probably had experiences in your life where you've heard someone that maybe isn't the best orator, but when they're speaking from their heart, and they're connecting with you on that level. And when that happens, magic can happen, because we're connecting with people. But when you're on stage and you're not being authentic, your audience can read it. They may not be able to identify exactly what's not right. They may not be able to understand what it is that they don't feel a connection with you about, but they do. And the fact of the matter is if they can't trust who you're being, then they can't trust what you're saying. Let me say that again. If they can't trust who you're being, they can't trust what you're saying. Now, we have a saying in the coaching business, a distinction that we make, which is called translation versus transformation. Translation versus transformation. Basically, what that means is that many people are really good at translating things that they've heard before. They've heard a concept, they've heard, a process or whatever, and they can be on stage and they can be speaking about it. But if they haven't utilized it personally in their own lives, or if they haven't utilized it with clients, it is just translation. But when they integrate it, when they're speaking from a place of authenticity, then it actually becomes transformational. They're speaking from that point of view versus to that point of view. So audiences can definitely pick up on that. And in my own personal experience, this is what came present for me. When I first started speaking 10, 11 years ago, I had a great speaking coach that was helping me through the process. And I had this idea in my mind that who I needed to be was very reserved, very cool, calm, and collected, and just use the power of my voice to smoothly go through my presentation. And I was in a training where we had to go up and speak and give our signature story and our presentation. And as I was doing that, my speaking coach would stop me mid-sentence and say, stop, do it again, go back, be more animated, be more expressive, be more engaging. So I'd go back and I do it again. And this kept going on for what felt like hours, it probably was minutes, but it felt like hours. And I remember being frustrated by that. But then as I got home and I started to reflect about it, I thought he's absolutely right. See, by me being Mr. Smooth, calm, cool, and collected on stage, I wasn't really being who I am. Where I was most effective is when I was teaching martial arts. And I was engaging, I was animated, I was physical. And when I started integrating that into my speaking, that's when things started to take off for me. So whoever that is for you, whatever person that is that you are truly expressing, make sure you're expressing that on stage and not trying to be someone else. JB, got anything you want to add on that?
Absolutely, man. I love that you shared that because I have a similar story. You and I have talked about this a few times, but way back when I first started, I'll take you way back to that first speaker training that I talked about going to. And I'm up there speaking, and if you're like most people, you kind of study other people who do what you do, which is what I did. Like I said, I had never spoken, but I'd seen a lot of speakers. I knew that was something I wanted to do, so I started studying speakers. And so when I got up there to do my presentation, I'm trying to emulate other speakers. And I'll never forget my speaker coach. He just said one thing. He said, "You need to smile more." That's what he said, right? I had no idea that through that entire presentation, I didn't smile, right? Because if you know me, then you know that's one of my secret weapons is my smile. If you hadn't noticed that, now you know, right? but in learning when to smile as well, right? And so once he told me that, I realized that I was trying to emulate other people, instead of just taking what they do and put it into what I do. And that's the mistake we're talking about when we say trying to be someone else. The best thing one of the ways you can become a really good speaker is to learn from other people, but you don't want to make the mistake of trying to be like them, if that makes sense. So that's what we're talking about here. Okay. Take what they have and integrate it into your personality, into what you do to make you better. And that's what Chris and I've learned to do along the way. So that's enough about number 2. Let's move to the next one. And that one is they fail to properly prepare. Anybody out there can relate to that? If you've been speaking long enough, as long as Chris and I have, you have made this mistake. But I'll tell you what, I've been also blessed that when I first started, I was forced to prepare at a high level. And then I remember someone asking me, well, do you get nervous when you speak? Do you get nervous? Do you get afraid? I said, I used to. I don't get nervous anymore. I get more excited. I said, the reason why I don't get nervous is because I sat down and I thought about, well, what would make me nervous? And for me, it was not knowing what to say, making a mistake. Then I asked myself, well, how can I avoid that? The answer, prepare, prepare, prepare. Okay, so I know that if I get on stage and I'm prepared, I've done my part. Okay, so I started that habit a long time ago of preparing at a very high level. And there's different ways that you can prepare. For me, I have a very, very good memory. Okay, I've been blessed with a good memory. Part of that is because I used to take acting when I was in college, and so I had to memorize lines, right? And so for me, memorizing and then adapting to it to how I want to say it is the best way for me to prepare. Okay. And then I've developed it over the years. For some people, it's about getting in front of the mirror to see how they look. And I had to do that. Remember, I said my coach said, you don't smile enough, right? And so I had to, that's one of the things I had to do, get in the mirror and practice smiling, right? I had to do that. For some people, it's right out the presentation. Just depends on what's comfortable for you, whether you create a PowerPoint that helps guide you. And when I say create a PowerPoint that helps guide you, I don't mean put 1,000 words on a PowerPoint. That's not what we're talking about. Maybe some key words there, okay? For some people, it's about visualization. So what is your learning style? What is your preparation style? That's one of the key things you want to make sure you do. And most importantly, you want to set up a periodic schedule along the way. If you know you've got a presentation that you haven't done very much in 2 weeks, instead of waiting 2 hours before or a night before, the best thing you can do for yourself is block off 30 minutes a day working on parts of that presentation. You'll be amazed that even if you just work on parts of it periodically, when you come together and you present it all together, the things that you remember and that you've worked on, they just start to come natural. So set up a schedule for your preparation. Honor how you best learn and prepare. And then when you get on that stage, whether it's a virtual stage, whether it's a live stage, when you get on that stage, you can say, no matter what happens, I'm prepared. And the other advantage of being prepared is when things go wrong, you're able to pivot because you already are prepared for everything else, your presentation. Wouldn't you agree, Chris?
Oh man, and I'm laughing. In fact, I wasn't even thinking of sharing the story till now, but one of my first out-of-state talks, this is probably 7, 8 years ago. I went to a college in Utah, and I had some slides in advance for that. And they said, hey, don't worry about anything AV wise. Jim is the best AV guy we've got. He'll be able to get your slides up and ready to go. So I get to my, the place to speak, plenty of time with my slides, and he can't get them up. So it's a luncheon that I'm speaking at about, anywhere for, I think it was 300 to 400 people. And it was the lunch lady convention for the state of Utah. All right. A lot of hairnets. No, just teasing. But anyway, so it's the lunch lady convention and I have to start at noon and I don't have my slides up, but I prepared so well. I just looked at Jim and said, we're going to roll. I can do this thing without the slides. So I'm giving the presentation and about halfway through, I make a point and everyone just starts clapping. Now, this is a point that I'd made hundreds of times before, and I never got an audience response. So I'm thinking, man, I must be getting pretty good here. Well, what ended up happening is when I made that point, happened to be the exact same time, 30 minutes into my presentation, that Jim finally got my slides up, right? So that's why they were clapping. But the fact of the matter is I felt comfortable enough to be able to do that talk without the slides because I prepared so well for it. So, and in addition to that, we've talked a lot about preparing ourselves and how we're going to show up and what we're going to do. But what's also important is to make sure that we're preparing, knowing about the audiences we're going to speak to. What are their challenges? What's the theme of the meeting? What's the demographics of the room? Are they going to be younger, older? What's the split between male and female? What are the themes of the meeting that you can integrate? So it's preparing those and tailoring your message so that you're speaking their language, so to speak. And then the final thing I want to share with you is this idea of being on time. So it makes sense, obviously, to be to an event you're going to speak at early. You don't want to be rushing in. So, you're off kilter when you get on stage. When I'm speaking at conferences, and JB, you're probably very similar to this. You probably get there hours before. If there's a conference, you're speaking later in the afternoon. I'll show up first thing in the morning because I want to start to talk with my audience. I want to hear things about what they're dealing with. I can relay stories when I'm on stage about conversations that I had that they're willing to have me share. So doing that up front, super important, but then also on the back end, make sure what I call landing the plane on time. One of the worst things you can do as a speaker is not be prepared and then go over your allotted time. I can't tell you how many times, that I've landed the plane and I've been on time and I've had the event planner say, thank you. Because I've been in the back of the room when the guy in front of me was droning on and all of a sudden he's 10 minutes over and I see the event planner walking back and forth like a caged animal because she knows her schedule's off. The best thing you can do is to be on time, land that plane right on time, or even a few minutes early. You always want to have them wanting a little bit more than going, man, I wish this guy would have got off stage about 10 minutes before.
You know what, Chris, I'm glad you said that. Before you transition into the next one, I'm going to tell you something. Here's a secret that most people don't know. But when you've spoken and you've spoken a lot, one of the things that you learn is when you don't finish on time, meeting planners remember that.
Yes, they do.
They remember that. And if somebody asks, if somebody asks for a referral from that meeting planner, that's one of the things they'll remember. Well, he was supposed to speak for 30 minutes and he spoke for an hour and 10. They remember that. So landing that plane on time is so important. And that comes from you preparing. That comes from you preparing beforehand as well. Good stuff, Chris. Thanks for sharing that story. I'm glad you did that. Well, let's take them to the next one, brother.
Excellent, excellent. So this is probably one of my favorites. And this is that speakers they talk about an event, but they don't tell a story. And if you think about some of the most powerful speakers that out there, they're almost always master storytellers. In fact, if you think about how information was passed down from generation to generation, even before the printing press, it was done through stories. The greatest speakers, the greatest teachers in our history have been those that are able to tell great stories. Now, why is that? Why is that so important? Well, there's some real interesting things that happen inside the brain when you are doing a story. Number one is it activates all parts of the brain. So it activates it visually, our feelings, all of our senses start to enliven. Even we can tell stories and remember songs from back in the day and even smells that we've had. It activates the brain. So an audience gets engaged when we're telling stories. Number two is it appeals to the brain's wiring. The brain is wired to see a cause and then an effect, a cause and then an effect. And when you're telling a story that then has a result to it, it's aligning with the basic wiring of the brain. Number three, what it does is it synchronizes the brain. We're kind of on the same wavelength now. We use the word connecting to an audience, but physiologically that's happening inside the brain. And then finally, what it does is when someone's hearing a story that you're telling, they're relating it to other experiences that they've had in their lives. So as a result of that, what ends up happening is you're deepening a connection. And where this really came present for me was, this was probably about, maybe 7-8 years ago. I was asked to be in a business mastermind group here in Denver by one of my mentors. And he had 3 of these groups all around Denver. And what he asked me to do is he said, I'd like everyone to get to know you, and I want to see which group would be best for you to be in. So would you put together a presentation for them, some kind of a training you'll present to all 3 groups? So I put together some training. I think it was something about how you could go to a training and then take the information and integrate in your business. Not the most exciting of topics, but that's what he asked me to do. And so I went to all 3 of those groups and it actually went pretty well. And at the end, we had question and answers. And in 2 of those 3 groups, I had people who had heard me do my keynote talk here in the Denver area before. And when we went to Q&A, 2 different people in 2 different meetings raised their hand and asked the exact same question. They said, Chris, would you tell us the story about the kid in the wheelchair? Now, I had not shared that story, not intimated at all in the presentation I had done, but it's one of my key signature stories that I use. And that's what it hit me. That's what they remembered. They remembered stories. Now, hopefully my content was good and they took something from it, but the key piece was the stories that they remembered. So JB, I know that you know the power of stories, and you and I have been talking. You've got some great ideas for how people can actually look at their lives, because sometimes they think they don't have great stories, but all of us do, don't they? Don't we, JB? And
Oh, absolutely.
tell us how you do that, and also a great way. You've got a really unique way of how to practice stories.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And the stories are so important, which is why we spend a lot of time on this in our workshop in our signature presentation workshop, because we teach our clients what we do, and that's sharing stories. And we'll talk a little bit more about the next one of why stories are so important. But I can remember getting started. Okay. And first of all, we have a lot of people come to us, don't we, Chris, say, well, my story is not very important, or my story is not sad enough. And I always tell people, listen, your story is your story. Okay. You can't change that. Right. And so you can't change that. That's what develops you. And so, but the genius of it is being able to connect your story with the content of your presentation, which is what we help people do. Right. And so we can help you. We help people do this because a lot of times people don't understand how powerful their story can be. I had one client that I remember she was at our workshop and she was like, well, my story is not sad. I said, well, is it funny? She goes, yeah, it's very funny. I said, well, great. Let's talk about it. Right. Because if it's funny, that's great. And so it doesn't have to be sad. It doesn't have to be anything but your story. And one of the great ways that I learned to really master storytelling is, I'll never forget this. My speaker coach, he challenged me to do this. He said, okay, I love that story, but here's what I want you to do. I want you to take somebody out to dinner, sit down at the table across from them, and tell them that story. That's how I got good at telling stories. Okay, just sitting there talking with somebody as if we're having dinner, telling that story. And that's how we teach it in our workshop to our clients. Just tell your story from stage as if you're sitting across someone at dinner, sharing that story.
Right.
That's a great way to do that.
You get direct feedback, right? Right, JB? I mean, it's like if someone's like tearing into their steak or their salad and not looking at you, you're probably not doing well. But if they put their fork and knife down and they're not eating, they're probably into the story, right?
You get the immediate feedback for sure. So that's one of the tips that we've learned along the way to help you really practice storytelling. And this is a great transition into our next mistake, absolutely. Right, Chris?
So let's bring us home, JB. We're going to go to number 5, which is that people don't deliver a talk that captures, connects, or closes. Tell us something about that, brother.
And you know what? When Chris and I first started talking about this section, we both just laughed because we have seen it before. And it's so important to know how to do a presentation that captures, connects, and closes. Okay. The closing part comes if your goal is to convert, which we'll talk about in a minute. But how do you capture an audience? Well, we just talked about it. One of the best ways to do it is to start off with a great story. Okay. When we share stories in our presentation and when we teach it in our workshop, we talk about take them through your hero's journey, which is what we teach, right? Show the audience how you're ordinary, extraordinary, and then share your why. Okay. Because when you do that, you capture the audience, but you also create the connection to the audience. So that's why the story is so big, because you create that connection. And when you can set the story up very well from the beginning, now the audience has you. Now they're leaning forward to, hey, JB, hey, Chris, what else do you have for me? That's what they're thinking, because they've already connected with you. You've already captured them, okay? And you've already created that credibility through your story, if it's designed the right way. That's how you create that connection. But how many times you have been at a presentation where you don't connect with the speaker? Okay, you're having a hard time staying with them because they're all over the place. Mm-hmm. That's why we structure a presentation a certain way so that you can keep the audience captured and connected to what you're saying. And when you connect the story to your content of your presentation, that keeps them connected throughout. And then comes the closing part. Having a closing. Here's what I tell people. If you're doing your presentation right, you're closing throughout the presentation.
That's right.
Okay. Here's what I mean by that. Let's say one of your purposes of your presentation is you have a book that you want people to purchase at the end of the presentation. Well, if you're doing it correctly, somewhere in that presentation, you're going to embed that you have a book. You may say something like, if you're talking about a topic, you may say something like, this is one of the things that I talk more in detail about in my book. And then you go home and you start talking. Well, now what have you done? You just told the audience you have a book. Okay. Now, when you get to the end of your presentation, it's time to close. All you got to say is something along the lines of, well, I mentioned earlier that I had a book, and if you're interested in finding out more about the book, or even purchasing the book, then come to our table in the back, and we'll be able to make sure that you get one, and I'll even sign a copy for you. Man, how quickly and easy of a close is that? Because I've already set it up from the big throughout my presentation, right? And I know Chris has a great way. Chris, I want you to share with the audience. Chris has a brilliant way of selling his book throughout his presentation.
Yeah, well, thanks, brother. Well, I'll tell you what I learned, and I actually had one of my mentors teach me this technique, which I bring people up on stage when I do my talks. Maybe it's just because I'm a teacher at heart and I love bringing people up on stage and then teaching.
But that's another way to capture the audience as well, Chris.
That's what I was going to say is, and so that's a way that I'm connecting with the audience, and I'm capturing that way is having someone on stage.
Yep.
But then after I have someone help me, what I'll do is I'll bring up my book and I'll place it over my heart. Right? Because people don't necessarily want to buy your book. They want to take a part of you home with them. Right? And I'll place it over my heart and I'll say, hey, Jenny, thanks so much for helping me out today. So appreciate it. As a thank you, I'd love to give you a complimentary copy of my new book. And in fact, afterwards, if you'd like me to autograph it, just take it back to my autograph table and I'll be able to take care of that for you. And then I hand her the book. Well, now what's happened in the audience's mind? They've connected me to a book. They've seen that I've given. I've told them that I'll autograph them in the back, and I planted that seed. When I started using that technique, my book sales more than doubled what they had before. So anyway, again, connecting, and to JB's point, just to kind of bring this to a close, is a close in your presentation isn't an event, it's a process. Let me say that again. It's not an event, it's a process. It's something that you're subtly doing all the way through your presentation. And then it's just an easy next step. Whether it's buying your books or a program. I've been able to sell coaching programs. I have one client that enrolled in 2 12-month coaching programs with me at the end of my talk. And that was as a result of me telling stories about the coaching work that I did that then transitioned him to invest in 1 year. And then after a year, he re-upped for another. So again, when you're doing that, whatever next steps you want for your audiences to take, remember, it's an event. It's a process. It's not an event. So there you have it, my friends. There are the 5 biggest mistakes that we know that speakers make, as well as some strategies and tools you can use to either avoid or overcome them. And what I'm hoping is that what we just shared with you had some merit for you, and that you were able to take some notes and possibly at least take one big idea, maybe more, but at least one big idea that you can use in your speaking and building your business. But I also hope that you're thinking out there and going, wow, that was some really good stuff, but I know there's probably more. And I know there's some other things that these 2 guys might be able to help me with. And JB's been talking a little bit and kind of planting the seeds. As you hear him talk about it, he's doing exactly what we teach, which is he said, hey, we have this program, and that's what we want to share with you now. And that program is what we call the Champion Speakers Academy. And the way the CSA works is it's, again, focused for people who either want to be speakers, they want to be on stage, they want to share a message, or they're business owners, they're entrepreneurs, they're maybe even leaders in organizations that want to connect to either promote their business or actually lead their teams in a much more powerful way. And the way that it's structured is when you're in this work with us, what you receive is, number one, you'll gain some great clarity about your target market. So when you speak, you're speaking to the right people with the right message. Number two is you're going to discover how to communicate the problem that you solve, right? So sometimes we can just go off on tangents about points we want to make, but most people are either encouraged by having pleasure in their life or avoiding pain. And when you can help identify a hot spot in their business, in their life that you can help them with, that pain point that you can help relieve, now you're creating some connection with an audience for a next step. Also, what we do is we help you actually craft your signature presentation so that it's something that you've got. And whether you use that on stage, whether you use it in radio interviews or podcasts or in front of teams to inspire them, you have a story, you have a presentation that basically you can utilize. And then also tools and techniques that you can transform it. So basically what happens is through your presentation to your audience, you become an expert. And when you become an expert, now they can either hire you for other speaking engagements, to work with them, their teams, their organizations, or to purchase your products and services. Oh, and by the way, there's much more than that as well. So JB, why don't you tell them exactly how it works?
Absolutely. Chris and I know just from example and then working with a lot of people that speaking is one of the best ways to grow your business, which is why we love doing this. And not just growing your business, but building confidence in yourself. That's one of the things that I want to make sure that you understand. You want to talk about building confidence in what you do and how you do it. Get in front of a stage of people, okay, and share your message. And you walk off that stage feeling like the badass superhero you were born to be. I can tell you that. But here's how it works. We have a 2-day workshop, and it's 2 separate days, 30 days apart. This particular workshop is designed mostly for local people, okay? We don't expect somebody to fly in and fly back out, okay? For people who are not local, we have a different workshop for them. But for our local audience, we have the first day is on April 2nd, okay? And that first day is where we're gonna help you craft that signature presentation and those stories and solve those problems and everything, all those pieces that Chris talked about, we'll do that. And then we have the reason why it's 30 days apart is because one of the things Chris and I learned and we got really ticked off about is we do this workshop, but we only did it 1 day, right? We did a 1-day workshop, and then people would take the information, they go out and do nothing with it. It was like, no, we do not want failure on our record. All right, Chris? And so what we did was like, okay, how can we get people to take action? That's why we have it 30 days apart. So between the first day and the second day, your challenge and your goal is to go out and book a presentation, okay? And we'll teach you how to do that and give you some ideas of what those presentations can look like. And then the second day you come back, then you have an opportunity to stand and deliver and get some hands-on coaching, okay? From myself, from Chris, and then feedback from the other people in the room, which is always priceless and valuable, okay? And then you also have 2 one-on-one coaching sessions with Chris and I during those 30 days. So think about that.
Yeah, exactly. I mean,
it's a lot of great.
You and I both agree, JB, that the best way to create a keynote is to schedule a keynote, right?
Exactly.
Because if you got it on your calendar, it may not be the best one you've ever done, but you're going to get something done. And when you set that on your calendar, things start to work in motion, right? Yeah. And man, I'll tell you what, when I started speaking, I wish I would have had something like this, right? Because, you know, we can create something that we think is good, and then we go and we deliver it. But many times what happens is we don't have the support system and the feedback. So we go and we even give a presentation, but then we just don't understand how it landed, where we could improve. And like they say, the biggest room in any house is the room for improvement, right? And we say in martial arts, we have a concept called kanai, stands for constant and never ending improvement. So JB and myself, we're constantly honing our craft as speakers.
Well, that's why we both have coaches, right?
Exactly. That's exactly right. And in fact, JB and I both spoke at the same venue back in October, and both of us afterwards were asking each other for feedback from one another, right? Because we wanted to make sure that our message was landing. Yeah. So that's how it's going to work. Now, what are some other additional benefits that you're going to get from that? Was number one, you're going to be able to identify your ideal client avatar. You're going to get a crystal clear idea of what your purpose is for your message. And you're going to learn the power of story. We're going to help you develop your signature story. So that story that you can use in any aspect that basically acts as the foundation for your presentation. You're going to learn also how to create that signature presentation. So you're not only just giving and telling a story, but use it to educate, entertain, to receive paying clients or other speaking opportunities. And of course, there'll be much, much more.
And
so,
I want to speak to that much more real quick, Chris, and just because we're getting close to the top of the hour. But one of the reasons why Chris and I love doing this is because we know one of the biggest problems with entrepreneurs is what we call obscurity. You got a great product, you got a great service, but people don't know you exist. Your target audience don't know you're out there. And speaking can help you solve that problem, because now you can get in front of those audiences. They can now know who you are. You can start to brand yourself as the expert. And that's one of the biggest reasons why Chris and I love doing this.
Excellent, excellent. So I know the question you're all asking right now, how does this work? What does it cost? Well, let me go over with you right now what the investment is for the Champion Speakers Academy. So our regular price for this 2-day event, plus the 2 coaching sessions in between and coaching you to deliver your own keynote address, is $24.97 in a one-time payment, or 3 installments of $9.97. But you guys have been here with us. You've supported us through this webinar. And so what we want to do is we want to offer you an early registration special. And it's going to basically work like this. If you go ahead and you can take your phone, and you can also look at the link below, you can scan and go to our sales page for this. And on the checkout page, if you use the discount code CSA 2022, and you do it by this Sunday, by midnight, this Sunday, the 13th, you'll save 50% on the Champion Speakers Academy, which means that price goes from $24.97 or $9.97 installments to 50% of that, which is $12.49 or $4.99, 3 installments of $4.99. So that's the program that we'd love for you to invest in with us, because we know that if you do that, and if you take the time to do it, we know the results you can get from it. And you can take not only your speaking business and or your regular business to new heights, because you're able to speak with a purpose and speak with confidence. So that's our Champion Speakers Academy that we'd love for you to invest in. But what I thought we'd do right now, JB, is I know there's probably some people that have some questions. I've been looking at the chat box here, and there have been several people making comments in that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to stop the share of the screen.
Okay.
And open it up to see if anyone has any questions.
Yeah.
Or Anza, who's helping us out here, if you had any good questions that popped up in the chat box. So go ahead, people, if you've got questions, you can go ahead and take yourself off mute and fire away.
Hey, one dumb question there during prep. So I think it's number 3, right?
Okay.
Fail to properly prepare. And you talked about, being ready. Do you also prepare the room? Like you talked about the slides didn't work. Do you come in early, make sure the mics are working right, all that stuff? Is there a process for that? I guess you'd probably go over that.
That's an excellent question. Chris, you want to take part of it? And I'll take it.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'm a huge person in terms of preparing. So like if I'm speaking even in the afternoon and I can get in at a conference that opens up in the morning, I'll get in first thing in the morning and meet your AV guy. Can be your very best friend.
Yes.
Number one, you want to be super connected with them and super friendly with them, right? And what I also do from a preparation standpoint is I do that early. But let's say an event has asked me to send my slides in advance. I'll certainly do that, but I also have them on a flash drive. Just in case something crashes and burns, I can be right there. I'm also big about making sure that I'm checking the sound and the slides before I go on stage. Generally speaking, before you go on, there'll be some sort of a break. So I'll be on there and making sure that I'm totally connected with that. So, if something goes wrong, it goes wrong, but it's not going to be because I didn't prepare.
Absolutely. And that's a great question, Alan. I learned that years ago. I get there early. We have this thing in the speaker world that if you're 30 minutes, if you're on time, then you're late.
Yeah.
Okay. And so my goal, I get there, and depending on the setup, if it's a conference and I'm speaking third or whatever, I get there either the day before or hours before, and I go, like Chris said, to that AV guy, and I look at a lot of different things. I look at the room and the setup. Okay. I look at, okay, where's the stage and how's it set up? All right. I'll look at the chairs. Okay. Are there rows and down the middle? Okay. What does it look like? How am I going to maneuver around the room? How are people going to come in, walking back and forth? They look at all that. So that's a very good question. And then I go through my slides. I use videos in my slides. So I don't just click through the slides. I have that sound guy let me run my video so I know what it sounds like beforehand. And so I do all of those. Those are big key parts of preparation beforehand.
Yeah. And there's one more that I do, JB, too, that I learned through my coach is I'll actually go, if I have time before I'm introduced, and I'll go start mingling with the audience.
I'll do it. Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I'll just
do it all the time.
I'll open up conversations. I particularly learned that when I was speaking to high schoolers.
You and I both. That's what
right. Because that's where right. So find the biggest, baddest dude, the guy you think that might give you some trouble. Go make friends with him. Yeah. Right. And now you've got allies in the audience, right. The people that sit up in front stage with me, I'll always say, wow, you're so close. Did they tell you I have a spitting problem? So I'll just say stuff like that to get them engaged. And then I'll say, well, I'll tell you what, just do one thing for me. Make sure you laugh at all my jokes. All right. So I'll just start engaging with them in that way. And now I've got allies in the room with me.
And what you've done is created that connection before you even get on the stage. Yeah. Great question, Alan. Any other questions?
All right. Going once.
Oh, I've got a question. Excuse me. Tell me about the all-day thing. Like, when does it start? When does it stop? And I assume we're going to have some kind of presentation prepared that we're going to be giving for feedback. But tell me more.
Yeah, we're right now, Dale, what we're looking at is basically a 9 to 5 for both days. We are going to be giving you pre-work. So there'll be a questionnaire that you'll have to start answering some of those questions so that you've got a good idea. So you'll have that pre-work to get you ready. And then what we'll do is in day 1, we'll be doing a lot of that fleshing out of helping you identify who your ideal clients are, what's the purpose of your presentation, et cetera. In day 2 and in between, you'll be crafting that presentation with our help in the coaching. And then on day 2, when you arrive, right now we're planning on having you have 2 opportunities to give that presentation. One, where you'll be up in front of the room, we'll give you direct feedback. Someone will be taking notes so you have that feedback. And then in the afternoon, you can give that at least a portion of that presentation again, using the feedback that you were given. So that way you're able to leave with some real tangible stuff you can do. It's not going to be theoretical at that point. You're actually going to have a presentation that you can use.
Right. And the pre-work is very important, Dale. Let's just say you don't have a presentation at all. Okay. And that's okay. We just ask that you have the idea, so to speak, of what you want to talk about, because we'll help you formulate the content. If you have the idea or the subject matter, what you want to talk about, we can quickly help you put that into whether it be 3 key steps, 5 key steps, and then talk you through the content of what you want to share, along with connecting it with your story and that sort of thing. So we can help you do that. But having that pre-work done beforehand is will take you a long way.
That's super helpful. To be really candid, my talk will be based on a book that I've only outlined in my head. So this is like a totally massive dropping me in behind enemy lines, so to speak.
Yeah. Well, here's what.
Go ahead.
So you say you have a book that's in your head?
Yeah.
Well, I want to speak to that real quick, because we've had clients that come in with the same thing, and what we found is by coming to the workshop, it made it easier for them to get that book out.
Yeah. Well, the point of the book is to launch the speaking career. So really,
gotcha.
It might. Yeah. Okay. Let's get the dog wagging the tail instead of the other way, right?
And Dale, shameless plug here, but my first book was first a Keynote. It was first my Keynote.
Yeah.
And one of my coaches, I think you know him, Joe Saba. God bless Joe. We were at a an event together, and he came up to me like he had been for several months saying, "Hey, Chris, how's the book coming?" And I'm like, "Well, Joe, I haven't really started it yet." And I'll never forget what he said to me. He looked at me and he said, "Chris, speakers write and writers speak." And he turned around and he walked away.
That was it.
Yeah.
Direct hit, right? So you can do it both ways.
Yeah,
I mean,
you
that's
can.
how I did it. I created the keynote first, and then I expanded the keynote to be the book.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's very helpful because a lot of the things you get, the clarity that you get on the problem you solve, target audience, but most importantly, communicating those things. And you probably, what I've seen is people come up with, remember stories that they haven't remembered in years that they don't necessarily use in their talk, but they use in a book.
Exactly. Yeah. Or processes or things that you wouldn't have time in a 45-minute keynote, for instance.
Right.
So, yeah. So everyone, it's a little bit after the top of the hour. We're going to stay on here. If anyone has some other questions that they have, that they, we'll be on here for as long as you guys want. I just want to pop this up here real quick one more time. If anybody's interested in the program, and there's the place for you to scan that. But just know that if you use speaking, it can be one of the most powerful ways for you to build your business. And we really feel confident in the system that we put together. We can help you do some of the same things and learn from our mistakes so that you're not taking the time and have to spend literally years learning it. You can do the investment of time with us, as well as your investment of money to come to that point where you can develop that and basically leapfrog some of the things that we had to go through in order to get to where we are today. So it's been absolutely awesome having you join us. I know I speak for JB, thanking you for joining us here. I'm going to stop the recording here because we're going to be sending this out to you. You'll get a copy of this recording in some of the follow-up emails. And if you have friends, business associates, staff members, et cetera, that you think could benefit from this, please share this with them as well. Or the event that we're going to be doing starting on April 2nd, please share that with them because we'd love to be able to continue to help people build their business and share their message through speaking. So this is Chris Natsky along with my good buddy, JB Braden. Thanks so much for joining us, and we will see you next time.